In a world where talent is evenly distributed, but venture capital is concentrated in coastal silos, smart startup money is heading for the Midcontinent. Welcome to the Midcon Markup, a podcast that uncovers the inspiring stories of our visionary tech entrepreneurs and the investors who believe in them. I'm your host, Cody Merrill with Cortado Ventures. Listen, learn, and make your Midcon Markup.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Midcon VC podcast. Today, we're fortunate to be with the first founder of a Cortado-backed startup, Martin Lien. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Martin, you're with Volt, but it started under a different name a few years ago. Can you give us the origin story of your current startup, and then what was your recent career experience that led to you pursuing that opportunity?
Yeah, so that is a long answer. So what Cortado originally invested in was RespondFlow. So that was the original premise, started as a bootstrapped idea that was spawned out of personal need at a company where we were focused on text marketing. After operating that for about a year, we realized that our internal tools actually ended up being kind of our most important asset. And we found ourselves with solutions that would actually serve our competitors within text marketing better than it would small and medium-sized businesses, which was what we were originally focused on. So that was when we then basically decided to double down on the infrastructure play of SMS and telecom and raised our seed round, $2.5 million back in 2021, and really dug in to what Volt is today. Which is built to help companies be able to manage, leverage, and launch SMS features without having to spend months, if not years, on internal tool creation just to simply make that feature a reality. So that's kind of what Volt has become today. Now we're proud to be able to have that initial product for Volt launched in May of last year, and already this month we actually just hit the milestone of $1 million in ARR. So definitely was a worthwhile pivot.
$1 million. That's a big milestone. So can you tell us the story from childhood through college, and at what point did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I knew for a while. So born and raised in Norway, lived there for the first 20 years of my life. My entire family is still all based in Norway. I'm grateful that I get to travel back often. In, I believe it was probably early high school, I knew I wanted to do entrepreneurship. But I also wanted to make sure that I didn't just go into it without an education. However, in Norway at that time, there was no education that allowed for the freedom of actually finding a entrepreneurial passion or how to just create a company from the ground up. So I actually found myself searching through, okay, well, if I wanted to get an entrepreneurial education, where would be the best place to do so? And non-surprisingly, of course, the US had great universities for this. And I actually found myself in Oklahoma. So the University of Oklahoma at the time was top 3 in the world for undergrad entrepreneurship programs. And I applied. It just so happened to coincide with the fact that Norway covers undergrad education. And if you go abroad, it covers up to $30,000. And it was almost fate that OU was $30,000 for out of state, which seems like an understatement when you're coming international. But yeah, that got me to come to OU. And at that point, of course, I'd already taken the leap. I'd never visited the US before until I landed at Will Rogers International Airport here in Oklahoma City and got to the university. So at that point, the leap had already been so big. So every smaller, more incremental leap into entrepreneurship and into getting experience with startups felt so easy. Even though, of course, it was big leaps. Like I, of course, knew that I couldn't work for money because as an international student, you are not allowed to get paid unless you get paid through a college credit. So for me, it actually helped me. Obviously, going to startups and telling them, hey, can I please work for free is a much easier thing to get a yes from than asking people to give you a paid job. So got a lot of really, really good experience. Worked for a little bit for a AI omnichannel chatbot company out in Denver, which taught me a lot about customer success automation and customer kind of arbitrage in a way. And also how to manage my time remotely and work within software.
What is customer arbitrage?
So from the standpoint of customer success, at that point, it was very, very early on. So being able to facilitate a multitude of customers and put them into the right buckets was the hardest thing for the biggest companies. And of course, the company I was with, they were doing this with IBM Watson, which back then was very, very early on with AI and, of course, helping out with sentiment analysis of customers. So was helping out with implementation for Unilever, Transamerica, and Nike and their call centers. So, I mean, for Expedia even as well, they had several 100,000 calls per month. And for them to have humans like manually kind of move these people around ended up being such a frictionful experience for their end customers. All they wanted was an answer. They didn't want to talk to one person that said you reached the wrong department. Now go to the other person and then go to the other person, and then the last person would give you an answer. The solution was then to use sentiment analysis when the customer asked a question to be able to re-guide it to the right person with the experience and the knowledge to be able to solve that problem. So implementing that not only saved those companies millions of dollars, but it also, of course, made a much more smooth experience for that end customer. And I mean, in a way, that's what inspired me to do what Responflow originally was, which is I saw what this technology could do at a scale that was big enough for the Fortune 500, but I mean, it wasn't accessible to small and medium-sized businesses. There was no such automation, no such efficiency. Definitely found a lot of inspiration from that.
So I think that you have a particularly unique vantage point in that you're from Norway, you came to Oklahoma for university, and you've been involved in entrepreneurship pretty much since you got off the plane.
Yeah.
You landed freshman year to now. This happens to coincide with a renaissance in the state of Oklahoma of venture capital and startup activity. What do things look like now compared with 5 years ago?
Whew. I mean, like it's not even recognizable. Back when we started Responflow, I mean, we were 4 guys in a house in Oklahoma City. We were just kind of hungry to do something. We all had jobs full-time at different startups and different places, but we wanted to do more. And our hobby was building companies, like all 4 of us. So every night when we came home from work, we would go straight to just the couch after maybe opening a beer. And
let's be honest here.
I mean, we were a bunch of young dudes, but we were sitting down and just working on the business. That was all night, all weekend. And we were never intending for it to be a venture backable business. We just did it because it was fun. We just happened to find ourselves building something that I personally had experienced at the startup I was working at being a problem, and that I'd seen there was solutions if we automated it with my previous experience. I was like, well, honestly, let's just build it and make it available to people. First building it to just solve my own problem. It did. Now solve it for other people. Let's make it available. And I mean, at first we made like what, $4 the first month, and then $74 the following month. Felt like $1 million. And it got us like really like addicted to like continuing to work. And we did like revenue share, which is funny. And I wish we kept the checks, because the first checks of revenue share of like $74 is laughable. I think we ended up with $2 each, but those $2 obviously felt crazy because it was like, wow, there's adults paying us for something we just put together nights and weekends. Like, can you imagine if we scaled this up? So that inspired us then to actually seek one of the early resources that was here in town with Stitch Crew, with Erica and Chris, and the program that they had there. We were in the same batch, got to go through.
You were the batch before.
Batch before. Okay, so you were batch 4.
Yeah.
You were batch 5?
Yeah, I've always been looking up to you guys as the people who found a way to, get a lead investor and put a round together, and everybody was like, how do we be more like those spot flow guys?
It was the luckiest thing, because we came into it, we wanted to just be around more people who had that passion in Oklahoma City. So we didn't even plan to raise capital. Like, we went through it, and then we were a month out from demo day. I knew demo day was coming. I wasn't afraid of like public speaking or anything, but I wasn't planning on having an ask at the end of it. But I believe Erica said, like, just put an ask. It'll be awkward if you stand up there and say you don't want anything. Like, you might as well ask and see what comes. And due to the fact that we had been running now a company that was profitable, if you don't count on the fact that we weren't paying ourselves, basically, and that we had grown tremendously. We had a 60% month-over-month growth. And we were reaching, at that time, it was $60,000 a year. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough for a side hustle. And when we pitched, it was also the perfect timing, because that was exactly when Atento had opened the doors and we're starting to really roll out the fund. So we pitched in November of 2019. Among the people that were there was obviously kind of the early members of Cortado, as well as Atento, which at that time was only Michael Bosch. So it was, extremely opportune time. Got to share some more metrics. At the end, I said, well, we're looking to raise a $500,000 pre-seed. Come see me afterwards if you want to talk. And the rest was really just history. At that point, we were planning to just continue bootstrapping and having everything running in the background. But suddenly we got approached and asked if $200,000 would get us to Tulsa. And of course, that pricked our interest, and we started the conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you're an early stage founder, not that far out of college, and you're broke and money's floating around, and you're just like so desperate to hire engineers to build this vision, to make this change in the world.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people lose sight of how important capital is. Like, it's not just the hustle. Like, to have a startup ecosystem, it really has to be based around the hand that's feeding the entrepreneurs.
Exactly.
And if you don't have a robust VC ecosystem, what startup is going to view this as an attractive destination?
I couldn't say it better myself. And that's really where it comes down to it. It was all luck. We were lucky that we already had a business that had started ramping up revenue. We were lucky that we got into the batch that we did, and that it just happened to be the time when both Cortado and Atento was starting their fund for the first time. And we were lucky that they were in the crowd, and we got to start talking to them, and ended up, of course, then being both firms' first check. I mean, it couldn't be more lucky.
Yeah.
That's the right word, really.
Well, I mean, there's some fortunate timing, but
yeah,
luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and you guys were capable people with a unique thesis, and you're doing something that's really important that a lot of people forget: the work.
Which is a fair point too. I guess you create your own luck in a sense, but yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy to think that obviously can come to a place where I think a lot of other people that I run into here in the US would say is like very random for a person from Norway. Just ends up in Oklahoma City after, of course, education and everything that could have gone anywhere. Most people end up in California or New York if you come from Scandinavia, and then just so happens to be at the renaissance of VC in Oklahoma. So that's a very cool time.
Well, I've got some tactical questions that I want to ask you as a founder. As a founder, you always have to move mountains, and you have to make a disagreeable world agreeable to this change that you're trying to introduce. There's a lot of influence. There's a lot of cajoling. I'm interested, how do you get meetings with influential people who may be ignoring your initial email pass? Or like, how do you fight through gatekeepers to have your ideas heard by people whose audience you desire?
Oh, so basically, how do I get in front of people that I need to talk to?
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, and it really depends. But for us, we've found tremendous success with LinkedIn. It seems like there are a lot of influential people who delegate their email and delegate a lot of other communication points. However, getting access to people on LinkedIn seems to directly reach them. I also think just being sincere. Oftentimes, especially if you're a younger entrepreneur, actually helps just saying, hey, I might not have the perfect product for you, but I respect what you do and I want to receive advice. I'm not looking to sell you. All I'm looking for is feedback from somebody who has the experience that you do. If there's somebody better that you know, I would love to talk to them as well. And by doing so, oftentimes if they are influential and successful, they kind of see a little bit of that themselves, and there's usually a lot of gratitude that then gets paired with wanting to give back. And that seems to be a really good result. And I mean, for so far, all the growth that we've done so far with Volt, we still don't have a single salesperson. All of that is me and my co-founder, Matt, primarily reaching out to people on LinkedIn.
This is really great feedback. I think LinkedIn is an incredible tool. There's a lot of research that you can do to identifying the people, but I think that there's a real art to crafting a cold LinkedIn message. If you were to look at your LinkedIn message inbox, what percentage would you say is a wall of canned texts that's telling you all about a bazillion features for a product that you couldn't possibly care less about?
I would say over 99%. It's painful to see the amount of people that reach out that's selling before we've even connected. And honestly, I would probably say a better person to talk to about that specific field and getting in touch with people for those technical answers would definitely be my co-founder, Matt. Like, he's just a wizard with it. But from what I've learned and from what I've seen and experienced, the best way is to ensure that you connect first. Start with the handshake. Don't include any messaging. Make sure that you then, once they accept, it's a much higher chance that they accept if you have zero message than if you actually include one. It's a very interesting insight that we found. And once they've connected, you don't start with, hey, I have this X product that solves X problem, let's talk. That's weird. If somebody ever knocked on your door, immediately stepped their foot inside and said, hey, so are you ready to buy? Like, you'd be weirded out. Like, start off with something that actually gets them to connect with you. Like, hey, like, I graduated from this college. I saw that you also did. Really love what you're up to. Leave it hanging like that. See if they respond. Oftentimes they'll be, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Or ask a question that fits their field, but is something that would be an easy answer. Like, for instance, like, hey, like, I really admire how good you are at finding and bringing on LPs. What do you think is the best way that you actually get in touch with people? Like, if there's a question like that, it's nothing that's meant specifically for personal gain. It's not a sale. It's not something other than just connecting on a passion that obviously exists between the two of you. And from there on, it's an easy ask to be like, hey, I would love to learn more from you. Would you be willing to jump on a call? I would say if you're looking for kind of just like a hack way to get past a lot of those walls to set that call, this is actually something that I learned from our lead investor, who had a lot of people book calls on his calendar through this method. And that is going to Calendly, using the name, last name, or just kind of the email abbreviation for kind of the / after Calendly. And oftentimes you actually find whoever you're wanting to set a call with have their Calendly there. And if you book a call, a lot of the people that's busy doesn't remember whether or not they sent you the Calendly in the first place. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Very sneaky. And I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
My method as a founder to get difficult meetings is I would find whenever that person was going to speak publicly somewhere, and then I'd show up, and as soon as they get off the stage, I'd be like elbowing little kids to like, hey, out of the way. I'm Cody. This is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'm about. It's such an abrasive approach that a lot of people are just like, whoa, like, I don't even know what to say.
I would say I admire that.
But then a lot of people are like, okay, this person clearly cares? They wouldn't have gone to this much effort if they didn't have this conviction. And then they get over the fact that they're not used to people approaching them in such a forward fashion. But the takeaway here for founders out there is that you have to do something that stands out. Like, you have to think about LinkedIn. What are the types of messages that are coming inbound to you? What's annoying to you? And then that rare time that there's a personal touch where someone's read your profile, they've gone to the effort to say, you went to school together, you both have started companies in this sector together, and then to very clearly in a few sentences establish the mutual connection that you have, say why you're reaching out, why you think that they have the knowledge that would be useful to you, and then phrase it in such a way where you're not immediately asking for a sale, you're asking for advice. And the most powerful thing for me has been whenever I've been able to convince people to join my success journey. And if they give you advice and you follow up with them, then they start taking ownership in your success. And then you've got all these little bees that are out there in the world doing your bidding for you. And it all comes back to being genuine, but also unique. Like,
Yep.
don't spam people. They don't like it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it is pretty basic. Yeah. Treat people how you'd like to be treated. And I mean, like you called out, I think it's a perfect way to really set the point. Look at your own LinkedIn. Like, there are so many people that has never probably even crossed your mind as people you would want to answer. Why would you reach out in the same way? Clearly doesn't work.
What about hiring? What is the best advice that you can give? Sourcing talent, interviewing, motivating, reprimanding, firing?
Yeah, so for hiring advice, I mean, I have one approach that I always take, and I find this is almost a little kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, because I try to think of how was it that I liked to work where I wanted to work, and how would I learn and put the most in. And I turned out that was like from intrinsic personal value of wanting to create my own company. So from that, I've actually started asking people, and it's usually a pretty easy yes for me if their answer is, I want to start my own company. At that point, I know for a fact, or even if they have a side hustle, I love that. That means that they are going to be spending nights and weekends, spending time completing and molding their mind and improving and learning, not for you or because you asked it, but because they want to better themselves. And every single thing they do outside of work, while a lot of people look at that as a distraction from work, I look at that as a complete boon. Like, if they learn how to set up articles that gets them number one on Google for their side hustle, you better believe that they're going to be so excited about that. They're going to be like, hey, Martin, we can totally do this for Volt as well. And I've seen it time and time again. So that's probably one of the things that I would say have been greatly successful on my end looking into it. Besides that, I mean, for motivation, so obviously I like to tie in my background for being born and raised in Norway. That's always been a really big aspect of how I grew up and how I ended up then getting a lot of really good memories, was really growing up with the work culture that was in Norway. While obviously I'm in the US, because I do like the fact that there is so much opportunity, I will say if I were to be an employee, I probably would have wanted to be an employee in Norway.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to that when I'm building benefits for our employees. If that's what I would prefer, why don't we make that happen? So that's why right now, like, every single one of our employees get full medical, 100% covered, no personal buy-in necessary for health, dental, vision, life insurance. We also want to, again, inspired by kind of how I grew up. Like, my parents would always have a full uninterrupted month of vacation where we would travel around Europe or sail or something where we got really good quality time. That's why we want to make sure that we had unlimited vacation as well, something with a lot of flexibility. And then lastly, this is something that has not even gotten close to happening yet, but I'm hoping soon. Growing up, there was always this cabin that I thought was ours. It wasn't. It was the company cabin from my dad's company, where every single Christmas party, they would bring around a hat. You would pull a number out of the hat, and that would be the week. It didn't matter if you were working on the floor or if you were the CEO. You only get 1 week out of the hat, but that week you have to take time off. You have to go up to the cabin, and you have to spend time with the 12 people that you wanted to for this massive cabin that otherwise would have been completely inaccessible for them, right there by the best ski resort in Norway. And like, just growing up with that, I was like, that is something I would love to be able to be kind of a boon for, of course, all employees, and know that it is equal treatment.
Very cool. So it is neat to me how you bring part of your social experience from your upbringing, and that has influenced how you think about your collective organization.
Yeah, and I think it's important because it is like, I mean, it's almost selfish at that point. Like, I would also want to be treated that way. Yeah, I wouldn't feel right if I didn't treat my employees the same way that I would want to be treated.
Growing up in Norway, what did you think about the United States?
I thought it was the coolest thing. Obviously, I'm like always been in awe of business and creation and the fast movement, like pace of it all. I would say that is obviously a reason why I'm here. I love Norway for all the values that it brings, but fast pace is not one of the words I would use for it. And of course, there's a lot of laws and regulations that's in place to protect the employees, which doesn't necessarily make it possible for a small scale startup out of a brand new entrepreneur straight out of college could ever get to the level that we're at today. So while I love Norway and all that it stands for, it's not a place I think I could start a company.
Culturally, how is ambition treated in Norway versus in the United States?
I think this is a big reason why it is what it is and how the people act. So a big thing that was making more and more apparent when coming to college here was, here, if you see somebody drive by you in a Ferrari, most people, doesn't matter if it's a janitor or somebody working through the drive-thru, they will look at that as, wow, that's so cool, that will be me. No matter what, it's just the core belief that anything is possible and that like there's no reason why that's not me. They obviously worked for it and they deserve it. In Norway, that's opposite. In Norway, if you drive a really nice car, you're viewed as, wow, you're overcompensating. What are you overcompensating for? And I think a large portion of that stems from the fact that, there is a public database where you can search up the last name of your neighbor and you can find exactly how much they paid in taxes over the last 3 years. And that is even a list that the public newspapers and everybody else post, like kind of the top 100 list of the top 100 highest wealth and net worth people. And it's kind of weird. It's almost like if you are on that list, the chances of your children being bullied are higher than if you're not on that list, because it is viewed as like, wow, what did they do to amass that much? Wow, they must have really taken advantage of a lot of employees. So it is just the core fundamental difference of the mass and the equality, I think, happened. And talking to my grandma and everything, I think it stems from kind of how it was after World War II and how there was a lot of rationing and everybody got the same. Everybody got kind of equal, but nobody starved. And due to that, that has always remained the same. It's all about the workers, not the employer.
Let's hop into a segment where we talk a little bit more about your business, your value proposition, a little bit more about the type of customer that you transition to whenever you switch to Volt. Why text?
So this started mostly due to the personal experience that I had working for a medical device startup. So as I was alluding to, we had a problem where I then found a solution through SMS. that was due to the fact that we had a really innovative technology that we knew we had a lot of people that wanted. Just from a simple Facebook advertisement, we got 3,000 applicants. I mean, this cost $60 to run this ad, by the way. And we got 3,000 applicants, all of which, I mean, the average treatment would be in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands. So obviously the value relative to the amount of people that submitted, but more importantly, the people that we could obviously impact the life of. The biggest issue that we ran into was that only 7% of the people that filled out the Facebook ad information sheet, they filled out their doctor name and contact details, their home address, their phone number, and they picked the time on their own calendar. Still, only 7% of the people picked up the phone when we tried to call them at the time that they picked, which is just shocking. I mean, I'd seen this at mass scale with companies where they didn't even have time on the calendar for like Nike and Unilever and Expedia, and they never got that bad. So I was like, wow, what is going on here? So out of frustration and obviously embarrassment, I started calling these people, and I was like, hey, my team couldn't reach you. What's going on? And the answer became the same and the same and the same every time. You never reached out to me. What are you talking about? I never saw you. I never saw your phone call. I was like, no, we called you at the time you picked. I was like, no, nobody called. Nobody I recognized called. It's like, did this number call you? Yeah. I get a lot of robocalls. So it turned out that everybody was ignoring the phone because they did not recognize the number, because it was called from the sales rep directly. So basically decided, well, we need to tackle this. The easiest way I knew how was to tell the team, okay, let's send an SMS. Let's send a text message 30 minutes before the call saying, hey, Cody, my name is Martin. I'm really excited to learn more about you and figure out how we can get you into a comfortable prosthetic socket. And by doing so, we increased the conversion rate by 233% overnight.
Wow.
Incredible. And all that was the difference was now the customer got that reminder, and they got in front of the right customer in a personal way. And when Martin said he would call Cody, Cody picked up the call, and it was Martin. Suddenly they had that relationship. Obviously, I knew immediately that we had to automate this, because obviously it would be difficult, but it reared its ugly head pretty quickly when people were on the call with Cody and they were texting Meredith, but they were saying the wrong name or texting the wrong name. But worse, we were in prosthetics, so they were saying the wrong amputation level, telling like a below the knee amputee that they have really good elbow prosthetics is the same as going to the eye doctor and saying, hey, let's take a look at your teeth. Like it's concerning, to say the least. At that point, you get ghosted and if not cursed out. So we had to automate it. We had to find a way to solve it. Obviously, my first instinct wasn't let's build a company around this. I wanted to try tools. I knew SMS had been around for decades. So I was like, wow, there must be tools out there that can solve this problem. But there wasn't. And I tried for 4 months finding something that allowed me to send a text message from a local 10-digit phone number that would have the Oklahoma area code to make sure that it would reassure them. And if they called that number, it would reach Martin or Cody or whoever on my sales team, and it would make sure that that relationship was never broken. I couldn't find anything. So by December this was 2018 at that time, I was on my way to fly home to Norway for Christmas. And I remember sitting at the SAS lounge in Newark, and I called up one of my college buddies. Is the youngest professor in OU computer science history's time at that time, still in his PhD. So I was like, if somebody can tell me if this works, he would. And called him up, and I was like, hey, can we automate this? And we talked for like the 30 minutes I had before we lifted off. And by the time I was on the plane, was already starting to build the website, starting to really get started. We decided let's do this. From that point, we started the company officially in January of 2019, started building it, got something out there in June. Obviously first solving it for the clinic, and it worked. We managed to get it to go, but it had no interface. It wasn't pretty. It was really manual. But that kind of got worked out. And of course, then that led into where I am now. When I left Norway, if you're asking, did I ever see myself dealing with text messages? No. but it is a highly complex issue that seems like it should be so easy. But when you think of the fact that the infrastructure is never updated since it became available in the 1990s, like it still is the same. And the core fundamental, like underlaying infrastructure is still Eric's lang, which is a language that no developer ever uses anymore. And that interests me. Kind of the same way that clinics interested me and how healthcare interested me. All the outdated technology and all the room for improvement means that there is so much innovation that is yet to be had. And that drove me into what is happening now. Of course, with Volt, the impact that we can have right now, helping people be able to truly connect, making sure that messages can truly go through and reach people, might be the difference of being able to, of course, help fundraise or help be able to get in touch if there is an emergency, help universities send critical messaging about, active shooters. There's any number of items that I can't believe that most text messages that send to a mass amount of people only get 70% deliverability. And that's why we're fixing
7%.
70. So they only get 70% delivered.
Okay.
So if you're a university that's sending out a mass message to their students, they can expect that about 30% are going to fail.
And that's not good in an active shooter.
That is critically awful. Yes, that would be lawsuit worthy.
What about these Amber Alerts? Those seem to not even...
They don't even use...
SMS.
No, they don't use SMS. So they go directly pinging signals into your phone. So that's built into kind of the phone's hardware. It uses the cell towers, but it doesn't follow the same protocols. Plus, Amber Alerts are obviously only allowed for certain emergency communication and is only really accessible in areas where there is a lot of connectivity. Not something that would work on, for instance, a military base or other areas, or if there is a natural disaster. Can't really ping off of the typical satellites as well.
Why did you guys make the decision to pivot up market and to design features and a product to sell to entities who used to be your most fierce competitors?
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, why did we ever go into up funnel? And the real answer is when we built the technology, we built it for this use case around texting for clinics and for being able to set meetings better. And as we continued to grow, we grew and grew, we ended up then getting a lot of other customers. And we started building out multiple features for this text marketing company that more or less spaghettied the product. That's the truth of it. Where the one thing that was the most solid was that we somehow could guarantee 98% deliverability, whereas our competitors were still at the 70. So we were kind of calling out, well, if you use RespondFlow, you only pay for the messages that deliver, because we could make that promise. Our competitors couldn't. Suddenly, of course, we realized that why can't our competitors do this? They're bigger than us. They're more capitalized. They have far more years under the belt than us. There really shouldn't be a reason why they can't. And we realized that our infrastructure, mostly thanks to the engineers that we had and the fact that we were so focused on our back end for the very largest part of our development process, was unique. And then, of course, there was a huge regulatory change that happened in the spring of 2021, which is right before we were raising our seed round. We realized that while we probably could have built RespondFlow as a text marketing arm to be a solid $20 million exit and a good company, and of course we were growing actively still, the true value that we had was, of course, bigger and better implemented into our competitors. And looking deeper into it, with the regulatory change, we also saw on the horizon that there would be a requirement for every company, even the smallest mom and pop store on the corner. If they sent SMS in the US, they would have to register with their EIN, put in their paperwork as if they were doing taxes, just to be able to be allowed to continue to send messages to their already existing customers. And we saw this tidal wave coming. that tidal wave has continued to go and still goes today. Actually, the end of this month is when the carriers are starting to block every single SMS that is not registered on this new infrastructure. And we're already seeing, now that we are in the position that we are, which is why we put ourselves here, that we're seeing a huge amount of mass software companies really scale up the need for this. So they're all reaching out to us now and being like, hey, Volt, like, could you all help us? We're pretty desperate. We're in a position now where we don't know how to register all these people. We considered all of those customers unregistered and didn't tell them how to do it. We have engineers that focus on calling. Let's say they're a call center software, but SMS is a critical piece of it. They just simply don't have the expertise in-house. So suddenly they need that help, and that's exactly where Volt is.
Well, thanks for making us look like smart investors.
No, I think more than anything, of course, for our investors have been so supportive through it all. And I think it does go into the truth of the matter where investors always say, kind of, especially for pre-seed, they invest more in the entrepreneurs than they do the startup. I think it's actually been told to us several times later on that even for Responflow, like while it had merit and while I was growing, there were several investors that knew that we were going to pivot at some point. So when we then finally found the path that we did now, they obviously are excited. And I do think it is kind of smart investing, because that's something that I didn't even see for myself back then.
What has it been like receiving money from Cortado?
So that was, the first experience was really, really fun, I would say, because we were in a period where everything was so chaotic for Responflow. Back then, we were still living in our house in Oklahoma City. We actually, after the demo day for Stitch Crew, we ended up actually getting $500,000 that was committed. And this was in March of 2020. So if people remember, that's obviously when COVID was really hitting Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. Everything was shut down. And one of the investors actually, we were basically ready to sign. The wires were getting ready and prepared. It's the Friday before the decision deadline on Monday morning. And I'm sitting at my day job waiting for this email to come through and be like, hey, congrats. We finished all our diligence. We are ready to invest. And of course, the other investor had already said yes and was already ready, and had given us confirmation. So we had 250 of the 500. I was sitting at my desk, remember very vividly. We got the email that they actually had to pull out because of the fact that they had companies that would go under due to COVID. So they had to back them, and they didn't have the capacity to take us on at that time. And at that point, I had my heart in my throat, right? I was ready to come home, tell the guys, hey, we got it, we're ready, we're moving, pack up. Two of the guys had already resigned from their jobs. So we were already very committed to this. So when I was supposed to come home with champagne, I instead stopped and picked up whiskey and walked in the door, because we all lived together, asked the guys to sit down. I broke the news to them. I told them, of course, that I had been sitting on this for 2 hours, so I had emotionally gone through the motions. One of the guys stormed out, was exceedingly frustrated, obviously. Was one of the guys that had resigned. And I told the guys, hey, let's meet up tomorrow morning. Let's figure this out. I expected none of them to be down there, but by the morning, I was going to go out to pick up some Starbucks, walk downstairs. They had already picked up Dunkin' Donuts. We already had coffee, stood around the whiteboard, got a hug from the guy that walked out and was like, hey, sorry, dude, that is not your fault. Let's figure this out together. We sat down, and from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., we had already gotten back to all the investors. Nathaniel was one of them. That we had previously talked to, but we had already, of course, gotten the allocation from the other investors and told them, like, hey, actually, we're looking to bring on more investors now. Obviously, it was the weekend, so I heard back from Nathaniel that Monday. But over the weekend, we had heard back from all the other investors, and we had over $370,000 suddenly committed over the course of 3 hours that Saturday. Monday, I got on the call with Nathaniel, told him like, hey, yeah, I think the round is happening. I think we're good. We now have more than we originally planned on. And this was, I believe, actually right before Cortado had inked the paper. But Nathaniel was convicted. He was very interested in being a part of it and was like, hey, like, let's go ahead with this, even if I have to like put my personal money in, and then we'll transfer to Cortado for like kind of the paperwork. So yeah, I mean, my experience with Cortado from the very beginning has been nothing more than conviction and support and excitement. Thankfully, the day before the wires happened, Cortado was officially created, and the money could come directly from, of course, Cortado instead of creating another, I assume would be a paperwork nightmare.
Yes.
But yeah, that's kind of how officially became into kind of the history books of being Cortado's first investment. So from that point, yeah, I mean, it's been nothing but supportive. Only incredible amounts of introductions and always willingness to help out every sense of the word. So really good experience.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. And at Cortado, there's tons of operating experience on the staff. And I think that there's inevitable amount of empathy that comes from that for our entrepreneurs. And we always want to be known as the investors who go above and beyond our position on the cap table to add as much value as possible. And for us, it's like, why not put our thumb on the scale and try to manufacture some customer intros, some early up rounds, and give them a chance to be fund returners.
Exactly. So hopefully I can pay it back that way.
That would be amazing. All right, Martin, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.